There was no way we could have predicted Mr. Lush's reaction. All of a sudden, he threw away his bottle as if it was a venomous snake trying to bite him and said, "Oh, I see. I used to do the same thing when I was your age. What a joy to find a few empty bottles at the side of the road and exchange them for an extra row of chocolates, I'd say. Nowadays, all I do is produce empty bottles instead of collecting them. Isn't that a shame? And I haven't thought about chocolate in ages, only beer. You know, sometimes I start drinking so much I actually forget what I'm doing. Oh no, oh God, I wish I was a child again." He started crying and buried his hand inside of his head. I would have asked him if he wanted a bottle of beer to distract him from his troubles, but Louise started dragging us down the street, away from Mr. Lush's garden gate. I didn't even have the time to process what was happening, and only got a chance to speak up when we were long since out of earshot. Angrily, I asked, "What are you doing, Louise? You ruined our entire plan." She gave us a very stern look. "I have an uncle that's an alcoholic. He stopped drinking because he couldn't even go to work anymore. He got treatment though, and things started to look up for him. At least until some dumpnut offered him a bottle of beer. And in the end, it only took that one bottle of beer for him to start drinking again, and everything got even worse than it had been before. Anna, Kai, we can't just go up to a man that has such an obvious drinking problem and offer him a bottle of beer." "But that was our only way to get his fingerprints. We know that he wouldn't accept a bottle of, let's say, lemonade," Kai tried to argue. "Judging by his current emotional state, I'm sure he'd accept a bottle of brown ale. After all, the bottle looks close enough to the ones he usually drinks," Louisa corrected him. We went back to the parsonage, snuck into the workshop, and first of all things, cleaned the obvious ink smears from the surface of the beer bottle, because there was no way the adults, my dad, wouldn't eventually notice it and start asking very uncomfortable questions that we definitely didn't want to answer. Then we opened the bottle, poured the beer onto the sink, and put it into a crate with the bottles of brown ale. In a brilliant move of manipulation, we started crying about how we needed something to drink and how nice it would be if we could take a bottle of brown ale to share in the old schoolyard. Janine gave us several incredibly suspicious looks, but for some reason her usual lie detection and thought-reading skills found no error in our betting, and she handed us a bottle with no further interrogation. That bottle, too, was treated to a hefty amount of ink from the workshop ink pad. We took off through the village to deliver the bottle to Mr. Lusher, this time without a bad conscience accompanying us, or at least Louise. The situation in front of the Lusher's house was quite unchanged. Mr. Lusher was still muttering into his head, while his father had kept reading the newspaper. "No more beer, no more beer," he said. Once more, we stood in front of the garden gate and called out to him, "But what about a bottle of brown ale?" He looked up, clearly surprised, and in that moment I very much realized that our trick wouldn't work this time around. We couldn't drink a bottle of beer we'd found, easy as that, but we were still collecting returnable bottles, so we needed someone to drink it for us. That logic fell flat with a bottle of brown ale. Who are you?" asked Mr. Lusher. "Oh, we've been collecting returnable bottles," said Kai, who clearly didn't share my concerns, luckily, because otherwise he might have just turned around and left, just like Louise minutes before him. "And we found his bottle of brown ale, an unopened one. Someone must have left it at the side of the road." "You can have it if you want, and then give us back the empty bottle." Mr. Lusher didn't seem to understand the connection between Kai's words and the bottle held out to him, but he seemed glad for the distraction from his breakdown and the opportunity to do us stray couple kids a favor. He took the bottle, drained it in a single swig, and handed it back to Kai. Carefully, he grasped it at the very bottom and thanked Mr. Lusher. "Thank you." Louisa agreed and then added on, "Maybe we should consider giving up on beer entirely and switch over to drinking brown ale." "Good idea," murmured the father, revealing that he wasn't as deaf as he liked everyone to believe. "What do you want to buy from all the money?" asked Mr. Lusher, as he gave us a bag with an additional 5 bottles. It really came to show that just because he was an alcoholic, it didn't mean he was a bad person as well. It actually seemed to be quite the other way around. Maybe the people who sought refuge in bottles of alcohol weren't bad themselves, but only did it because the world around them was, and they couldn't bear it any other way. "We're going to buy so much candy," said Louise. Mr. Lusher nodded and apparently drifted back into memories of his own childhood, maybe tasting the chocolate he bought for himself when he was only our age. We said our goodbyes and almost felt a little bad for suspecting him to be the porcelain store intruder. Though we couldn't just cross him off the list, because there was a chance that he'd broken into the store while drunk and simply didn't remember what he had done. We hadn't quite left the property when Kai couldn't resist the temptation to turn around one last time. "Didn't you find it odd, waking up inside of your arbor yesterday?" "A little," said Mr. Lusher. You drank too much, added his father, without looking up from his newspapers. Though Mr. Lusher seemed to be remembering something. I had the strangest dream I was carried by two little angels, a young raccoon, and some old scuffed grizzly bear. Sounds like a nice dream. The young raccoon grinned, and even the two angels couldn't prevent a twitch of their mouths. It seemed like he had stayed completely oblivious to our late-night rescue mission. "See you around, kids," he said. "Thanks for the LA." There was a short wave, and we noticed that Topher's hand was covered in a blue glistening layer of ink. He was going to be left wondering how on earth it had gotten there. We only waved back and disappeared in the direction of the parsonage. Chapter 18, in which we continue our search for the perpetrator. The way back home was quiet. There wasn't quite as much fun in trying to convict someone of a crime if you thought him a very nice person. "Well," said Kai, almost reading my thoughts, "detective work is just as much about trying to prove people innocent as it is about proving them guilty, so I'd say we're still doing a good thing."